Hello everybody, Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here. We are coming at you for our 20th online beer tasting now. We're going to be doing Strange Fellows Brewing. This is our blind tasting experience. So I've never had any of these beers before tonight. I hope I like them. It'll be a really awkward event if I hate them all. I am joined again, second time in 3 weeks, by Grant Flegg of Copper and Theory Beer Imports. Hello Grant, welcome and thank you for joining us. Yeah, we are live on the tasting. There we go. So these guys are in East Vancouver. They got started in 2014. We have these 4 beers in front of us. I assume some of our folks are even more familiar with them than I are. Tell us about them. Tell us about this brewery. Tell us about the beers we have in front of us.
So yeah, we're looking at Strange Fellows Brewing, and as you said, opened in 2014. The 2 guys that open it are Ian Hill and Aaron Jockier. We might as well get started by talking about Ian. His background is that he actually has a long time brewing history. He actually majored in biochemistry in university, and so as he was graduating, he didn't really want a job in a huge lab or anything like that. So he was kind of looking for something to do, and ended up brewing. He actually spent 18 years brewing at Yaletown Brewing before deciding to start his own project, which is Strange Fellows now, and he found his partner Aaron. Aaron's grandfather immigrated from Belgium, and found there to be a distinct lack of quality beers on the Canadian market, and so he started home brewing. And his grandfather taught his father, taught Aaron, and so Aaron actually started learning how to brew at the age of 16.
Oh wow, that's an early jump into brewing. Good lord.
Yeah. And the 4 beers that we're looking at today are Jongleur, their classic wit beer. This is part of the core line. Botanic Gin Goza, and this does have a few gin botanicals in it. This one's a seasonal, just for the summer here. And then Talisman, West Coast Pale Ale, and Guardian IPA.
Okay, we actually have the Popinjay West Coast Sour actually in front of us.
Oh, sorry, you have the Popinjay. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
And the Popinjay, which one is that replacing? Sorry.
That's instead of the West Coast Pale, and then we are still finishing up with the Guardian IPA.
Cool.
So let's jump in with the Jongleur here. So Belgian style wit. Now I like wit beers. I like pale Belgian beers in general, whether it's a triple or a wit. But it's not one of the ones I'm the most familiar with because there isn't exactly a ton of wits on the market. Why don't you walk us through the style and the particular interpretation that Strange Fellows is doing for this one?
Absolutely. So wit beer is a pretty classic German style beer, all things told. This is looking for a bunch of wheat in the malt bill, and then typically a little bit of orange peel and coriander to go along with it. And this does indeed have both of those things. Interestingly, up until by the 1950s, wit beer had almost entirely died as a style. And then it was, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the guy who made Hoegaarden, he actually respurned interest in wit beer with the Hoegaarden recipe. And so it was as a result of him that we now still see it, and it isn't just some kind of archaic style.
I actually really like getting Hoegaarden in bars, the giant fishbowl pint glasses, which I really enjoy. They're just the most ridiculous. I think Sister's Pub in town still serves Hoegaarden on tap, and you get them in these giant mugs. They're wonderful things. But yeah, I don't see a lot of wit beers coming out of Western Canadian breweries. We see some Hefeweizens, we see some American wits. We've had a few triples come through, but I can't think of another wit off the top of my head that's come out of Western Canada in the last few years, unless I'm missing something really obvious.
I mean, there is the Village Wit.
Yes, I was missing something very obvious. Nicely pointed out.
But the downside with it is that despite how very, very clean and drinkable these beers are, there seems to be, for one reason or another, a very limited market for them. So not a ton of breweries have been able to hang their hats with wit beer as a staple beer for them.
I notice this is quite clear. I just gave this kind of a bit of a swirl and dumped that in. It's fairly, I assume it's not heavily filtered like a Crystal Weizen or something, but it's not as cloudy as some wits I've had. Is there a light filtration put on it, or is this a stylistic choice, or am I going way too far on a beer that you don't know quite that well?
Well, I'm not sure if it's quite that heavily filtered. We can see a little bit of haze to it, and so I think that they're not trying to remove any wheat or any of that kind of stuff. It could just be filtering down to the bottom of the can or things like that.
That's certainly
the
possible.
typical advice on pouring wit beers would be, pour 2/3 and then swirl and pour the rest, and then you'll get the rest of that haze there.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I was just wondering about the haze level, but I really like this. Like, it's bright, it's fresh, it's got tons of orange, tons of just, oh. I love how fruity and clean this is. I get a little bit of that Belgian ester character, a little bit of almost kind of, I always think it was kind of a waxy note off the yeast. And then also into like lemon pepper, into white pepper. It's got a lot going on from the yeast, but it's still very fresh and fruity and immediately approachable, which I like about it.
This was a bit of a gateway beer for me when I was starting to adventure into all the beers. I really, really latched on to wit beer as being like these very, very interesting beers that were still so accessible. But then that really opened the door into Saison for me, as you were talking about, for that peppery character that you get from them.
I think Saison was really my gateway into craft beer as well. Saison DuPont, which I now actually can't stand, because that DuPont yeast now is all I taste. It's kind of like Unibrew. When I first started drinking craft beer, I got really into Unibrew, and I drank so much, especially of La Fin du Monde. And now when I drink those beers, all I get is just Unibrew yeast up front. And there's nothing wrong with the beers. It's not the beer's fault. It's just with my palate now, all I get is the yeast hit, and everything I used to love about the beers kind of drops away, which is so sad. I really, really do like the beers. They don't agree with me anymore.
I mean, the big thing is that with Unibrew particularly is that they have that very house style of the beer on lees, and you get that house yeast character so prominently in it that I do get how someone could feel that is a little heavy-handed.
I also think it might be fair to say that the beers aren't aged on lees quite as long under the new ownership versus the original ownership of Unibrew. I don't want to get too controversial here on the first beer. We haven't even dropped our first F-bomb yet. I don't want to, piss off Sleeman Brewing forever just on the first beer. We'll do that on like beer 4. But
right.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of more sessional beers, and I think for those keeping track at home, this is like our first beer in like 2 or 3 weeks now that is neither an IPA nor a sour, so go us. That includes pale ales as well, obviously. But we're actually doing cider next week, which is kind of a fun break. So we had a hard look at what we were doing, and actually last week I just put it out to the crowd and said, hey, what do you guys want to see here? And it was just cider was what was coming back. So we're going to have Brett Hopper from Uncommon joining us actually in the store next week, which will be really fun. So why don't you introduce us into the Gin Goza?
Yeah,
I also love the
absolutely.
packaging.
So this one is isn't part of their core brand, but is doing a seasonal run for them. If you're not familiar with Goza, this is another kind of old world style of beer. This is another wheat beer that uses a salt profile to it to balance out the tartness. So it's a sour wheat beer with salt. It's typically what you're going to be seeing with Gozas. And then this one in particular has the addition of juniper, black lime, and coriander, if I recall correctly, and grains of paradise as well.
Which is really just a fancy word for multicolored pepper.
Truly. I've always wanted to put just grains of paradise in a pepper grinder and then just go with that.
Sure. Oh wow, that is really aggressively gin. And I would have said there were more floral components to that than they say on the thing. Like, they don't say anything like hibiscus. They don't say, no, juniper berries, black lime, coriander. No. Huh. I actually get really floral hits off of that. Like almost into honeysuckle. I get ripe mandarin oranges, like Christmas oranges. Oh, I'm a huge fan of that. I will admit, when I saw this, I was like, okay, this is either going to be great or this is going to be something I'm going to have to talk around. That's
great. As I've been mentioning about Strange Fellows is that they have very much an eye towards balance and drinkability in all of their beers, at least in these core lines. Even their sour and barrel aged stuff that they have out in BC tends to be very, very drinkable, despite being wacky with these huge cultures and barrel aged for however long. But even these beers, with all the additions that it has to it, are highly, highly drinkable. We
were actually having a really interesting conversation about drinkability in a beer. We got the new Got the new Two Crows Negroni Sour this afternoon, and it's great. I'm glad I shared a bottle. I would absolutely share a bottle again. I don't know if I could get through a full bottle of that, though. It's just so much all at once.
I really appreciate the adventurous nature of Two Crows. They do such interesting beer, and already as it stands, being based off of a Negroni, I'm not sure that the beer drinking culture at large is quite as experimental with cocktails. They might not be expecting that huge bittering component that you'll get with Negroni.
And it certainly had the bitterness.
Even with this, I can't remember what the number is, but they add a huge amount of herbal bittering components straight into the beer. But yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't got to try it myself yet, but I'm rather interested. I've heard some reviews, as you've said, where it's a little polarizing.
And yeah, people are already just right on top of this one, the Mandarin Orange. We had a question jumping back a little bit where I brought up esters specifically. Eric's asking, what are esters and how do they kind of contribute to the flavor profile? They are one of the major chemical compounds that contributes to flavor and aroma in anything, not just beer or wine. And I get a particular, when we say a beer is really estery, especially in a Belgian sense, what you're saying is you're smelling a very particular, it can come off phenolic or plasticky or kind of oily note that is very particular to certain Belgian yeasts. And that's what I mean when I'm saying estery. It's that most things are esters. Usually your major orange and citrus components are types of esters, but in that particular context, what I'm saying is I can smell the very particular Belgian yeast aromas that I associate with the style. And that's not a bad thing. If there's too much of it, it can be a bad thing. But I thought it was really well done here. It was just, I don't know, we haven't had a proper Belgian beer oh God, what, like 6-8 weeks? When was the last time? Like, I can't remember the last time we had like a proper Belgian ale on the channel. And it caught me a little by surprise.
Yeah, that ester profile is really a signature for a lot of those Belgian beers. They're all about that yeast profile, especially Saison, as we were talking about before. That peppery note is typically driven by, it's called the POF plus yeast strains. Even Hefeweizen, the banana and clove profile you get there, comes from esters and phenols.
Yes. So I'll be very interested to see these two side by side. When they say a West Coast sour, I assume they're just going for a dry hopped sour is what they're meaning, or is there a particular style for a West Coast sour as opposed to a Berliner Weiss or a Florida Weiss?
Well, yeah, effectively this is a tart beer that is using that more modern, sexy, fruity hop profile. So specifically in this one, we're seeing Citra and Vic Secret for Popinjay.
Nice.
And so yeah. That's where that all comes from.
Will we be seeing the same sort of souring process for the Gin Goza and the West Coast sour, or are they going to use slightly different souring components?
To my knowledge on it, they are both fully lacto fermented. They are not just quick kettle sours. To my knowledge on that, I could be mistaken on that, and someone might correct me.
Fair enough. Do you want to just break down for people the difference between like a quick kettle sour and a proper lacto sour?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are souring things, there are a couple different options. The two most common ones that you'll run into are, the most common by far is kettle sour. And so what happens there is after you mash your grains and you've extracted all your sugars, and before you do the boil for the hops, is you add a souring culture into the kettle and just leave it there for however long until you hit your desired pH level, until you lower your pH enough to your desired acidity, and then you just boil it off, kill typically the lactobacillus when you've reached your acidity. What that tends to bring is a bit of I find a sharper, less integrated acidity to the whole profile, versus if you actually get it to the fermenter and add lactobacillus or your souring culture at that point, and if you're doing souring through there, a little bit softer on the palate, a little bit more integrated into the overall profile of the beer.
I think that's a really nice way to put it. I find that anytime I've had a beer that wasn't actually acetic, that I felt that it had kind of a light vinegary note, those tend to be those quick kettle sours, and they also tend to be very abrupt. The one that kind of jumps out to me in terms of that level of kind of really snappy acidity would be like the Phillips Oro Blanco grapefruit sour. That to me is really the prototypical. It's now going to turn out to not be a kettle sour, but to me that style is very exactly what I expect from a kettle sour. The sourness is immediate, it's sharp, it's snappy, it's bright, and yeah, it's not as well integrated as in something that the souring is done a little later on. If you like a really, really tart beer, I can see where that's exactly your thing. And there are some, like if you're really playing with an aggressive aromatic, you would want that extra sourness to actually carry it off. But for something as subtle as this, I think the little lower and slower ferment on the lacto here is, I think, rather appreciated. Okay, so let's move right into that West Coast sour since we already started talking about it a little here. So this is the Popinjay. This is the white can. So this is part of the core range. Was this the first sour these guys made, or at least for your market?
For us, we got the Popinjay in at the same time that we launched them in Alberta. I don't know how long this has actually been a core beer for the brewery, but I think that since effectively launched, they've been trying to integrate lots of different sour beers into their lineup, mostly in 750 mil bottles is their barrel and sour program.
Let's take a step back and talk about that a little bit, because I mean, for us, we see the white cans here. That's the core range. We've got the bright purple of the seasonal, but this is just dipping our toe in the water of what all these guys are doing. They've got a barrel aging program. They've got big 750 mil one-offs. Do you want to talk about a little bit what's going on in the background with these guys that maybe we haven't seen so much in this market yet, but might be coming at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. So just the other day, in fact, one of my counterparts from Vancouver, she had actually sent me a 750 mil of one of their barrel-aged wild ales called Hilton, and they do this. It's just a beautiful, gorgeous beer with a nice, soft profile, but such interesting souring profile. If anybody listening does make it out to Vancouver, I highly recommend a visit to the Strange Fellows tasting room, or even to Brewery Creek or what have you, so you can pick some up and just try these barrel-aged beers out, or the sour beers out. Beyond that, they do vintage Russian Imperial stouts. They do rustic saisons in that line, and they do just a whole bunch of different beer that are more one-off or periodic releases.
We haven't seen any of that here yet, then.
We've seen as at launch of Strange Fellows in Alberta, which I believe was about 2 years ago, we saw the Boris Russian Imperial Stout, and we saw the rustic saison that they did. But so far, that's been about it that we've seen in Alberta.
I did not make. I was not around for those, so I did not get to try those. Or maybe we just missed it.
I'm petitioning for the more of the 750s come this way. That might be a little greedy because I want to drink them more than anything. But
that's fair.
I think that there's a market out there for it.
There's definitely still a market for bombers. I still like bombers. I might be the last person who still likes bombers, but I still like them. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Popinjay now that I've had it. I don't know. Maybe we could have done this before the other sour, because like the grapefruit from the West Coast hops is the immediate thing. Like it's very grapefruit. It's very grapefruit syrup. The pine is more in the nose. I don't get any real kind of pine drops character in the mouth, but I really get that. God, I miss West Coast IPAs being a thing. I love that bright, fresh, woodsy grapefruit. Like and I like the sour base. I really do.
Yeah, for this one, as I said, this is really, as soon as I crack the first can of the 4-pack, I am so inclined to drink through the whole thing. I do find it just so crisp and refreshing. It's not trying to rip your face off the city or anything like that. But just that Citra Vic Secret hop combination is just so delightful. And then it's just a really, really simple malt bill using wheat and Pilsner malts.
I always forget Victoria's Secret's it's a hop blend, isn't it? It's not a particular hop strain, isn't it?
You know what? I'm not sure about that. I just I'm not sure if I was aware of that.
Yeah,
it could be.
Anyway, and yeah, Craig, I could also drink absolute buckets of this one. This one, this was fascinating. This is just right down the heart of what I like most in beer. It's an unapologetically West Coast IPA, except it's kind of a sour, which is perfect for me right now. At least as long as it stays somewhat warm outside. Because my appetite for sour ales, the second that we get snow, is basically just falls off a cliff. I drink them all summer, and then I just wait till spring.
And the great part with this beer as well is that 4.5%, 8 IBUs. Like this begs for patios. You know,
Definitely.
it's best friends with patios.
I like that.
The other thing that I don't often say this with beers is now that we're starting to see, at least we were before COVID, beer bars starting to experiment a little more with beer cocktails. This would just be fantastic base for doing something like a beer sangria with some tropical fruit juices, or with even just adding whole fruit to the glass. Just that nice, classic, easy to build off of pine and grapefruit base, and then just add to that. This is just such a fantastic beer. It's just A, just a patio crusher, but B, is a starting point potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Let's run through some questions here. Justin, not really a question. The Fernie Brewing Tequila Barrel Aged Sour from this year was a fantastic beer. I agreed. Okay, we're now in beer 3. We can start alienating breweries. I haven't been a huge fan of a lot of the Fernie large formats the last kind of year and change. I really have been liking their single hop IPA seasonals in the 4-pack tall cans. I thought those have been slick. But I kind of felt like I won't say lost their way, but they'd had a couple of misses in a row with their big bottle series. But that tequila sour was really quite something. And, if it had said anything other than Fernie on the label, I think we'd have sold out very, very quickly. I think a few people were a little gun shy because it was a Fernie beer, but man, that beer actually absolutely rocked. And you're absolutely right. I think that was one that got a little bit missed. Well, he asks, how long has Strange Trails really been pushing this hard? He says he was there a long time ago, and, well, couldn't be that long ago. They didn't open, since 2014. And doesn't remember this sort of breadth of flavor. Has there been any change, in the time that you've been working with them? Have they maybe started smaller and gotten more experimental, or has they been, really reaching for the stars right from the word go?
I think really they've been reaching for the stars since day one. Ian Hill is very, very ambitious with what he wants to do. And as I said, he has, before he even started Strange Fellows, he had 18 years of brewing experience. So he kind of knew what he wanted to do. He knew that he wanted to do a lot of old world European inspired beers that had a West Coast twist to it. That was a very day one decision. And also the barreling program. And I don't think that there's been a sincere drive to get better, just because the beers, to my opinion at least, have always been drinking just phenomenally.
Beautiful. We'll let the questions kind of trickle in. We're going to quickly talk about what we got coming up next. So no wine tasting this week. We are taking a break for the long weekend. We tried doing a wine tasting over the July weekend. It was our slowest selling wine tasting ever. So we're not going to do one this weekend. So we will talk about next week's upcoming beer tasting. Well, beer in inverted commas. It is a cider tasting featuring the 3 core ciders from Uncommon Cider. And Brett Hopper from Uncommon will actually be joining us live on camera here in the store. And we'll be working through the core range here. So we'll have their dry craft cider, their hop cider, and finally their Haskip apple cider. And we will also be talking about a really cool local cider program that Uncommon has coming up. And we'll be tasting that and launching that, at least for the Lethbridge market, on the Wednesday night. So that's coming up. We also have a cider from Revel Cider. These guys, for the most part, you probably know these guys for their giant 750 mils. They've got a really brilliant lilac cider, and they do some really fantastic, challenging work. But people sometimes miss it. They also make these surprisingly affordable little single cans in both the farmhouse cider as well as this hibiscus perry. I mentioned to Brett that, hey, we're going to be doing this Revel cider as the 4th. He's like, oh man, those are fucking great ciders. So he was obviously excited about it. So, I don't approve of the strong language, but that's fine. That is coming up Wednesday the 9th. So that is in a week tonight. On the Friday, this is something I've been wanting to do for a little bit, and for everyone in We Love Maps Club, this will be your favorite tasting we've done so far, because we are going to do the northeast corner of Italy, talking about all these tiny, fiddly little subregions. We're going to have to refer back to the map probably 15 times to talk about all the little differences. And most importantly, the thing I'm proudest of all of this, we're not doing a damned Prosecco. This is exactly the part of the world where Prosecco is from. This is the area around Verona, northwest of Venice. So We have the Suave region, which is just the tiniest little part of Italy, and they work with the Garganega grape variety here, as it's properly called a Garganega, which I'm never going to get used to, but apparently that's correct. This is my second favorite white grape variety after Riesling, and this is just this utterly spectacular winemaker who does effectively nothing but Garganega. She makes 4 wines, 2 bone dry Suaves, 1 just a little bit kind of demi-sec, and then 1 full sweet. We carry all 4 because they're absolutely fantastic wines. Next up, we're going to do a Pinot Grigio Ramato meaning copper. So Pinot Grigio, of course, has pink skins, and if you do a little bit of skin contact on the wine, you end up with this lovely kind of dusky pink color. Most of you, when you hear me say the word Ramato, will be familiar with the Cortegier Kobe, which is the one originally we had planned for this tasting when I started putting it together about 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, that one's sold out. We've been selling the Atoms kind of side by side with it all summer while it's been tough to get because of, COVID shipping woes. And it's still a very, very good product, just $1 more, so we're going to go with that. After Prosecco, the other thing that this particular part of Italy is really known for is Valpolicella. So naturally, we aren't doing one. But the Valpolicella region is known for 3 grapes, which is Molinara, Rondinella, which most people would say are kind of the filler grapes, but the star of the region is Corvina. And so we are actually going to do what I consider like one of the best under $15 bottles of red wine in the store, the Castelforte Corvina Veronese. This is a surprisingly serious and killer little bottle of wine for like 12 and change. Now, why are we doing a 12 and change dollar bottle of wine? Well, so that we can do this one, which is 30 and change. This is just light and fresh and all the charming, pretty things that I like about Valpolicella. We're going to talk about Valpol, we're going to talk about Ripasso, we'll talk about Amarone, and just a tiny, tiny bit about some of the dessert wines made from that. But I just wanted to feature this because I think for the amount that we charge for this, it gets shockingly overlooked. This should be like selling by the case. Finally, the wine that I wanted to do because I could. By all rights, this should be where we put the Prosecco because it is a major region in this part of Italy, but I don't want to because they're boring. This is Teroldego, which is both the region and the grape. These are from the Dolomites, or the Dolomite Mountains. This is big, it's inky, it's powerful, it's got tons going on. This is the wine that kind of was, I need an excuse to do this, let's find some things to build around it. That's not completely true, but that's not that far from the truth either. I really think this is a fun lineup, and it's a really great way to get back into wine tasting, so we have some interesting stuff. So that's coming up, not this Friday, next Friday. So that was a bloody mouthful. Let's let Grant bloody talk for a while, and we will jump into the Guardian IPA. Go ahead, sir.
All right, so yeah. Guardian, the last one on the list, is their IPA. If anybody has a bit of a longer memory and is familiar with the brewery, this one's actually been around for a while with them, and it actually used to be marketed under White IPA. Then everybody found out that White IPA doesn't actually sell at all.
No, it doesn't.
For no good reason. I remember, was it
Chainbreaker?
Was it Chainbreaker? Thank you, from Deschutes. Oh, what a delightful beer!
And we sold buckets of it, buckets and buckets, like 3 flats a week.
Apparently, they just made it for the Canadian market. It was a bigger seller here than it was in the U.S. But they have shifted this one, and now it is known as their Hazy IPA in the series. So it is made with wheat and Pilsner malt in the grain bill, and then we're looking at Amarillo and Citra dry hops on this guy. 60 IBU, 6.5%. This is the strongest one in their core lineup. And just comes out of the gate swinging with those stone fruit hops.
Oh yeah, big stone fruit hops. That's just peaches for days, isn't it? That's really nice.
Yep. Still, despite having 60 IBUs and all the hops, it's still remarkably drinkable.
Oh, we had a comment come in wondering if you could comment on the Talisman. There's apparently some folks watching in BC that have the Talisman and want to know about that.
So yeah, the Talisman Pale Ale is another one of their big core beers over at Strange Fellows. It's shockingly light for being a West Coast IPA. We're looking at 4% on Talisman. I actually have it just over here. So yeah, 4% on Talisman, and it is just a gorgeous little beer. So crisp and light and drinkable. But and then for having 4%, it's also, I believe it's 29 IBUs. So for your final gravity versus IBUs rating, this will probably come out on the side to be very much accenting those hops. So don't think that it's a small little pushover beer just because it's a 4% beer.
It's got some backbone.
It does have enough backbone from the hops. But yeah, it's just absolutely delightful. And for anybody who doesn't know the art, it's this here, very tasteful mermaid with some fish coverings.
I'm kind of sad that I think the reason we didn't do that one was we originally tried to order. There were 5 Strange Fellows SKUs in Alberta, and 4 were in stock. So those are the 4 we went with at the time.
Yeah.
So
we do have the talisman back right now.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I think we just sold out of their other seasonal right now. Though it is coming back in, actually, the Beldam Old World Pilsner.
Okay.
Which is just everything you want in a crisp, clean European-style Pilsner. Pretty much just straight classic on that one. Not a lot of West Coast messing about on that.
And normally I would be right on board, but Establishment's releasing another batch of part-time model, which is my favorite Pilsner ever, and I'm picking it up Saturday. So it's a bad time to be selling me Pilsners.
Right?
It's you know what? Sometimes we carry 1,000 wines. We bring in probably 15, 20 new beers a week. Sometimes there's just something that fits you like a glove, and it's just you, and that's kind of part-time model for me on the beer side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see you drinking out of your Establishment anniversary glass there too.
I am, yes. They gave us a really, really sweet price on these, so I picked them up as kind of a thank you for all the staff. And then Corey broke mine, so this is hers. So.
Well, thank you for the donation for the pouring, Corey.
Yeah, there we go. But yes, I noticed the glasses, and I will say these are more robust than the wine glasses in the same shape. I think they're a slightly thicker glass, so they survive a little longer. I had a very similar glass shape from Austria that we actually sell. Beautiful glasses, but we've only been doing these for, oh bloody hell, I think we've actually been doing this almost half a year now. I think we've had 4 die, whereas these, I think we've had 1, and it gets used more. So I'm a big fan of the thicker glass. So, and yes, it is the Establishment glasses because I don't know. I like the design and I like the shape of the glass. I'm trying not to fanboy for Establishment too hard, but you know, I can only do so much.
They're a great little brewery, and I think that Mike and the whole team there really care about the products that they're branding, and they're being really conscious about what they want their beer in, and yeah. So it's probably a choice for the thicker glassware.
It's got to be a very interesting time to live in Calgary and to drink beer. I mean, we were talking about this. We kind of did last week kind of the Calgary breweries we don't talk about enough, and we could have had like a 5-week recurring series on that because there's just so much right now, and so many breweries that I at least really like one of their beers, and that includes right into things like Wild Rose. I still like High Harvest, always have. I like hemp pale ales and hemp IPAs. So I also really regret the sad death of rye IPAs. I really miss those. I really loved them, and they're just not a thing anymore.
I recently saw on the shelves again, what is it? The Red Rye IPA from Apex Predator.
Really?
The Northern Grace. Yeah, that was my favorite beer that back when they were whatever they were before. Yeah, whatever they were before. That was my favorite beer from them, and then they axed it from the core lineup, and it made me so sad. And I'm also going to blame Brett Hopper for that one because he was working for them at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But probably a decision, not his decision, I would guess.
Yeah, it was entirely his decision. Let's just put it all on him. Screw that guy.
I think I yelled at him for a year for it.
Well, I can remember buying the Phillips Hot Box because it had the Krypton IPA in it, which was the rye IPA, and they steadfastly refused to sell it as a bomber, as a 6-pack, as anything. You can only get it in the damn Hot Box, and those really... Yeah, let's just piss off another brewery. Those really awful Skookum-back IPAs that were in the same box that I absolutely couldn't stand because they tasted like root beer, and then a shitload of hops in my root beer. They just kept building up in my fridge to the point where they took over my fridge because I just kept buying the hot box and just leaving the Skookum in the back. No, I love a rye IPA, and they're totally absent from the market. I think it's an absolute tragedy. I'll make sure to yell at Establishment about that when I'm there. Just, get some beers in me, start yelling about rye IPA. You'd be surprised how often that works.
You know what? I would believe that. As a home brewer, I won't go on too much about that at all. But me and my former home brewing partner, we would always go to design a new beer. I go, can we put rye in it? I'd like rye in it. We ended up with rye IPAs and rye grisette and a whole bunch of stuff. He begrudgingly, because of me, allowed rye.
No, what I called house beer for the longest time was basically a rye grisette with 100% Strichelspalter and then just bittered with a little bit of Centennial. It was exactly what I liked, and I made that same batch. Ooh. Well, there was also the batch that shouldn't have worked, but kind of did. I ran out of rye, but a friend of mine had unmalted triticale he was willing to sell me if I drove out to his farm, and that's how I broke my mill, was trying to put unmalted triticale through it. I put it through 4 times and it eventually crushed, but that actually turned out oddly well. But yeah, don't put unmalted triticale through a malt mill. It doesn't like it.
I'll remember that. I'll let the professionals do that.
Yeah, exactly. Let them break their own damn mill. People are starting to run down with rankings. Who have we got from the regulars? Deirdre at 2134. That's respectable. 3214, 3412. Yeah, I think this has been very polarizing. We have 2 people who have it either first or second, and then the next 3 have it at dead last. So, you know what? If this is polarizing, that's a good thing, because you know what? If they're making something that polarizing, it means they're not boring. And that's what I'm looking for, because let's be honest, there's lots of ways you can make a boring beer, and when some people love it and some people hate it, that's at least a step in the right direction. 3241, and you really like 1. 4312. And yeah, I mean, one thing I think we're going to get out of this beer tasting series when it's all said and done and we're finally have a vaccine for COVID and we can all go back to something resembling normal life, people are going to really get back on brewery touring, because we've had so many breweries that we've gotten introduced and just talked about for long enough that I think we've built some super fans for breweries that maybe wouldn't have had them down here, and I'm really proud of that. So that's been a lot of fun. Anyway, it's
interesting living in Calgary, being downtown. You get to see the pedal pubs. Have you seen them at all?
I'm familiar with the pedal pub. Yeah, they're still going, and I don't get it. Like, do you have to wear like a decontamination suit? How do you pedal pour with? All right.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
No, it was just I was hearing on the CBC News today that a karaoke bar in Quebec was the source of 40 different infections. There were like 6 people from the karaoke bar, and then that spread out to 40 people, including 3 of the Quebec area high schools.
That's more evil than the karaoke bar normally puts into the world. So, good Lord. Well, Grant, thank you again so much. If anybody has any last-minute questions for Grant, this would be the right time to hit me in the comments. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap things up here. Me and Brett Hopper will see you on Wednesday when I can give him a really hard time about canceling the Northern Grace. So we'll do that. And we will do the Uncommon Ciders as well as the Revel. And then we'll be right back at it on Friday for our Northeastern Italy tasting, proudly not featuring Prosecco. So thank you, Grant. Really appreciate it. You have a wonderful night.
Can I make one closing comment?
Absolutely, by all means.
One thing that I will say to anybody who cares for it, one thing that's really cool that Ian Hill did as he was starting the process of opening the brewery is he actually started a website tracking his entire process from kind of conceptualization until a couple months after he opened, kind of saying the pitfalls and things to look out for. So if there is anybody who just wants a good read, or maybe anybody who's thinking about brewery, this is all for BC, so laws are a little bit different. But the website is called imstartingacraftbrewery.com.
Okay. I think Aaron will throw that in the YouTube description, I think, after we're done here. And yeah, otherwise it's imstartingacraftbrewery.com.
You nailed it. It's very tricky, I know.
I'm going to go check that out when I get home. No, I can't actually help Aaron tear down the equipment right now with my hands, so I'm just going to do that as soon as I'm done this. So that sounds like a good read. Thank you very much. We will have you back, Grant. This was a lot of fun again. I'm sorry for being so absolutely checked out last couple of weeks. I just was not ready to do a beer tasting so soon after my injury. I think this was a lot more fun and a lot more fair to you. Thank you for coming out again. You gave me a mulligan, and I appreciate it. So have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, so that was Grant Flegg of Copper in Theory. This was a lot of fun, folks. We will see you out for cider in a week. And until then, I'm Kyle. This has been our 20th beer tasting. And thank you all very, very much. And have a wonderful night.